guest today is author, investigator John Llewellyn. John is the author of several books. His books are based upon the crimes he has investigated. Please welcome John Llewellyn.
Thank you.
John, give us a briefing about your books.
Well, I have 4 books published that you can find on Amazon.com. And the first one was kind of an experiment, learning how to write and seeing what I could do. The title is Murder of a Prophet, The Dark Side of Mormon Polygamy. And it's a takeoff of the murder of Reuben Allred in 1977 by Orville LeBaron.
You're talking about fundamentalist Mormon polygamy, yes.
That's right. Yeah, this is all fundamentalist Mormon. It doesn't have anything to do with the LDS Church.
And the murder of Dr. Llewellyn Allred. Dr. Llewellyn Allred was my uncle, and I have read that book, and you were so right on. I was amazed that you published it as fiction.
Well, I had an advantage because while a deputy sheriff, I was in charge of all the sex crimes, and somehow they started giving me all the polygamy cases. And I had compiled a 3-volume profile on Orville LeBaron. I was receiving information from the Church of the Firstborn and from the Kingston group and the Allred group about Orville, and I had pictures, the whole works. And Orville had been sneaking into Utah under a fictitious name, trying to coerce tithing money from the various polygamist groups here locally. And especially,
he had his own group, didn't he? He had his own polygamist group.
Yeah, he broke away from the Church of the Firstborn. I think he called himself the Church of the Lamb of God, something of that nature. And he was sending letters to the president, just like Rulon Jeffs is right now. And he thought he was the one mighty and strong. And you'll find the one mighty and strong is supposed to come and set the church in order and the whole world in order, and supposed to be the most powerful person under God.
So Warren Jeffs now is threatening the whole world with all these catastrophes, and Orville did the same thing, didn't he?
That's right. That's right. And it seems like this is what the way that these people go. They just go from one stage to another till finally they either can declare themselves Jesus Christ, or they declare themselves the one and only prophet that calls down the sword of heaven, I guess you might say.
Orville LeBaron ordered the murders, the blood atonements of approximately 30 people, didn't he?
That's correct. Yes, he was a mass murderer, and the day that he was killed, I happened to be in the dispatch office, and the dispatcher looked up at me and she says, "This woman says that 2 girls come into her office and killed her husband." And I asked what the address was, and of course I recognized it right off. It was in Murray City, and so I said, "Call Murray City, notify them, and tell them that I'll meet them at the scene." And I got my profile, my intelligence file, and met them at the scene. And at that night, we identified the 2 shooters, which were 2 of his juvenile wives, plural wives. But it took the Murray City and the county attorney's office about 3 or 4 months to put the case together. It's one thing to know who it is, but you have to gather all the evidence and put it together so that you can prosecute.
So Dr. Llewellyn Allred, my uncle, I know he was gunned down in his own office. And this was done under the heading of justified blood atonement, according to Orville LeBaron.
Right, right. And, the reason that he murdered Rulon was so that his brother, Verlin, would come to the funeral, and then he would gun down Verlin. He was trying to eliminate all of the competition in the Church of the Firstborn. And Verlin, his brother, was the prophet there at that time.
Well, he did kill Joel.
Yeah, he killed Joel, see? And then Verlin took over from Joel, and he needed to kill Verlin. So that's why he killed Rulon, is so that Verlin would show up at the funeral. So the funeral was held at the Bingham High School in
You're
Suffolk
right.
County. And I talked to the sheriff and told him, I said, we're apt to have some problems. And so we had quite a few deputy sheriffs there at the funeral. And Dick Forbes, the investigator from the county attorney's office, told me later, after he had solved the case and interviewed the people, he says they did, in fact, come around a whole car full of Erbil's people with guns circled there 2 or 3 times and decided that there was just too much police there. Otherwise, we'd have had another bloodbath.
So this is the book, The Death of a Prophet. And your second book is?
Um, when parents convert to polygamy, and it's about a young lady. I give her the name Emma in behalf of Emma Smith, Joseph's first wife, and she finds herself on a polygamous compound, and here she is, a teenager, and all these different men trying to seduce her, and the different ordeals and the things that she has to go through, which are in fact true, which a lot of the young people have gone through. After I wrote my first book, I had several young people from the Allred group contact me and tell me their different stories, and this is what prompted me to do this book. Although it's fiction, it's based on fact.
And it's based on a lot of stories that are so similar to her reality.
That's right, correct. The third book is Polygamy Under Attack, and it's a fact-based book, and I go into the True and Living Church, a polygamous group headed by James Harmston, and also into the theft of $1.54 million from Virginia Hill by Owen Allred and Lemoyne Jensen and their inner circle in Apostolic United Brethren, which is the second largest polygamous group in the state of Utah.
Isn't the Apostolic United Brethren the same group that the star of Sister Wives, Cody Brown, belongs to?
Well, that's where he did belong to. I don't know what his status is now. I kind of think that he's trying to start up his own group, because I got reliable information from inside Apostolic United Brethren that they tried to discourage him of doing it. And they told him, if you get involved in this, you're not to mention Apostolic United Brethren or Lemoyne Jensen, the prophet, or anything. But of course, the media found out that he belonged to Apostolic United Brethren. And of course, you can understand why they wouldn't want him associated with Apostolic United Brethren, because of the major lawsuit that they were involved in, where they stole $1.5 million from Virginia Hill.
And were found guilty.
And well, it was a civil case, so they were found culpable, and the judgment was handed down where they had to pay $6.6 million to Virginia. And
But who paid it back?
well, apparently the people did, the members of AUB, because they were asking them to do what they could to raise the money. People were mortgaging their houses, selling their ATVs, doing all sorts of different things, and they had all sorts of money-making programs going on. And they eventually got the money. Every check that came from them came from Apostolic United Brethren. And even though
But John, you're telling me that they stole $1.5 million from Virginia Hill, were found culpable, had to pay it back, and they got their parishioners to pay it back for them, so they stole it twice?
Well, that's one way of looking at it.
I look at it like that. Looks like they fleeced their sheep to me, as well as Virginia Hill.
Well, this organized fundamentalist business is very profitable. During the lawsuit, they provided documentation showing that they brought in at an average of about $1 million a year in just tithing alone. That doesn't include all the other donations in property and different things that they received. The tithing is probably only 50% of the actual money that they bring in.
Wow.
They'll have people quick claim property over to them, and then they'll turn around and sell it and keep the money.
Wow.
And you,
Well, your second book then goes into these different con artist crimes in the different groups.
this is the third group, yeah, and then it goes into Tom Green also, and his taking of the underage girls, and his prosecution. Uh,
Well,
and
he also took the government for a lot of government funds in
oh,
the
I'll say
process.
he did, yeah, a good $1 million according to the AG investigators. Uh,
Well, isn't that a kind of a standard? Look at Warren Jeffs. He actually was an artist at it. He even got money for Homeland Security. Can you believe it?
well, once you incorporate a town, even though it's owned by the priesthood or the group, you're entitled to certain government grants. And of course, these people are no dummies. They took advantage of all of these government grants. And so essentially what was happening is the government has been subsidizing the FLDS, which is Warren Jeffs' group, for years and years. This, I think, is finally coming to an end. Through the schools, through the fire departments, through the roads, through the water, and it's all it does is enrich the priesthood. And of course, Warren Jeffs was the priesthood.
Wow, what a
It's a real
moneymaker.
scam, but it's not illegal. But it's sure as heck unethical.
Yeah, it is pretty unethical.
I mean, there's not enough corruption in government without subsidizing these fundamentalist groups.
Well, they're also subsidized tremendously for all sorts of government funds for their children. Tom Green was notorious for what he took for his children.
Well, that's true, and he subpoenaed me in his criminal non-support case. I don't know why. Uh, the reason he subpoenaed me is he happened to be the paralegal of the attorney that was representing Virginia Hill, and I was the lead investigator. So I had to work directly with Tom Green uh, in, in the investigation, and so he was supposed to be the intermediary between me and uh, uh, Don Red, who was the attorney. So as I would accumulate these important documents, Tom would say, "Well, you've got to give them to me. I'm the paralegal." So I had been furnishing him all these very crucial, important documents for the case. And when it came time to go to trial, by this time Tom Green had been convicted of child rape, criminal non-support, and bigamy, and was in prison. And Don Red called. He says, "Hey, John, I need all these original copies. All I've got is copies. I need the originals." And I said, "Well, you have them." He said, "No, I don't." And I said, "Well, I gave them to Tom." And Tom said I had to give them to him. Well, come to find out, I learned from one of Tom's cohorts is that Tom was keeping all these originals, and he was going to use them to 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 blackmail Don Red in saying, "Hey, I either get a percentage of the judgment, or you don't get all these original documents." Anyway,
Tom Green was a polygamist that was flamboyant and on TV and out there trying to make polygamy wonderful, just like Cody Brown, wasn't
right,
he?
right, yeah, he was. His downfall is that he had all of these girls that he had married. Some as well. The court established that his first marriage with, let's see, I can't remember her name right now, but she was 13. But I got information that she was actually 12 when he first had intimate relations with her.
Well,
And
didn't he marry three or four of his own stepdaughters, teenage kids?
well, what he did is he married two sisters and the mother, and another two sisters and the mother, and then a third woman. So he was marrying the mothers and the daughters, and he put the youngest daughter in as the head wife over her mother and her aunt. And of course, the two older women couldn't handle that, being directed and controlled by a year old child. So they left Tom, and that left him with two sets of sisters, and then a third girl, five young girls. And most of them that he married before they reached age 18, just about all of them.
Well, he was very flamboyant and out there into the public and is quite well known. You can find out all kind of publicity things on him on the internet.
Well, yeah, and you can read about him in my third book, which is Polygamy Under Attack. Uh, he literally talked himself into prison. And I was trying to build the case, and he was so busy with media interviews that he didn't have time to work on the lawsuit. And I told him, I says, Tom, this child rape charge is very serious. You need to do something to get rid of that. Ah, no, he says. He says that's the easiest one to get rid of. He says she conceived while we were in Wyoming, so that Utah doesn't have any jurisdiction. Uh, the the trouble is when you conspire to leave the state to commit a crime, both states have jurisdiction. So
And you have the Mann Act.
right. And then he changed his story and said that she conceived in Mexico. And the prosecutor, David Levitt, and I was attending the trial once, and he was having trouble with another journalist who said that she she claimed journalist privilege and wouldn't testify as to some of the things that happened between her and Tom during an interview. And David Levitt says, John, would you claim journalist privilege if I subpoenaed you? I says, no, I'll just tell the truth and let things follow where they are. So they wouldn't let me attend anymore. They exclude all the witnesses. So I was excluded from them in the next session while I testified what Tom had told me. And I don't know that how much impact it had on him going to prison, but I think it had quite a bit of impact because all of his people started to denigrate me and condemn me on the internet. There was quite a program that I was a spy and a secret agent for the Attorney General and all sorts of crazy stuff.
Well, you are very bad after all. In all of those fundamentalist polygamist organizations, there's one thing they don't want told, and that's the truth, and you dared to tell it.
Well, you were raised in a polygamous environment, and I became involved with the Apostolic United Brethren, and at one time had 3 wives. Now I only have one, and I'm a hopeless monogamist. And what I did was wrong, but what I learned, and especially the mentality of the fundamentalist, how they think and the lies that they told, it's permissible to tell lies. I don't think that I could have built the case without that information. So in a sense, what I have done is kind of repented or tried to make up for my mistakes getting involved by exposing, challenging their sacred beliefs, which I have done with all of my writings and on my blog, which is polygamybooks.org. Um,
John, I think there's a total misconception about people in general. They think, well, if you were born low class in, say, India or something, you can never get out of it. And we're kind of like that in the United States. For example, I don't think we're responsible for anybody's behavior but our own. But I also believe that those who have walked through the mud and got out of it know more about how it was being there and helping other people out of it than anybody else could possibly know. And I personally want to thank you for your courage. I really, really respect it. I am, as you are aware, a polygamous born child, 5 generations. As far as I'm concerned, I was born in slavery in my own country. And I think people should know about this.
well, they should, and you talk about being oppressed. Women are definitely oppressed in Mormon fundamentalism, and some groups more than others, the FLDS being the most oppressive. As we see daily in the newspaper, the things that are going on in Texas and with Warren Jeffs. But uh, Mormon fundamentalism is just a fraction of the women that are oppressed in Islam. And if you study Islam, and there are several really good books, there is such a parallel between the fate of the women in Islam and the fate of the women in Mormon fundamentalism. The parallel is so close, and it's all based on absolute authority, absolute obedience, and oppression of women. The only way that you can get women to go along with these polygamous behavior is to oppress them and to belittle them and turn them into, like you said, slaves, which of course is another subject. But on that subject, my fourth book is The Rape of Rachel Strong, a true story of how Jim Harmston, a 64-year-old prophet and stepfather of 20-year-old girl, coerces her in plural marriage. And she becomes, I think, the 13th plural wife. Her mother was the third plural wife, and now she's coerced into becoming the 13th plural wife. And what he did is he had a special house where he put his 3 youngest wives. And each Saturday night he would go there to have sex with one of these girls. And he had a special room in the basement where he did this. And then after the act, he would make them take birth control pills so that they wouldn't get pregnant. Now, all through Mormon fundamentalism, Brigham Young and all of them, the primary object of plural marriage is to raise up a righteous seed, is to have children. And here's a prophet making them take birth control pills so that they wouldn't get pregnant, which is proof positive that it's about sex. All of this other baloney and business about raising up a righteous seed, and this is what God wants to know, is just to justify their being able to have sex with many women.
Well, today's polygamists are extremely narcissistic, whether they claim religion or not religion, because it's a narcissistic behavior to start with.
Well, that's where the ego comes in.
Right.
I said that it's really all about power, money, sex, and ego. And if you look at Jim Harmston, look at Ervil LeBaron, you look at the Lafferty brothers, another blood atonement where they killed their sister-in-law, and you look at Warren Jeffs, they're narcissists, they're megalomaniacs.
Well, even in the case of David Bryan Mitchell and his stealing of Elizabeth Smart, he was stealing her for a plural wife.
If you look at Brian David Mitchell, within the concept of Section 132, he didn't sin, because the greater law was you had to live plural marriage, and he had to break a lesser law to live a greater law. And this goes back clear to the Garden of Eden theory. They had, Adam and Eve had to partake of the forbidden fruit, in other words, break a lesser law to live a greater law, which was to multiply and replenish.
Well, John, all polygamists find a scripture to justify the fact that they're not going to obey the law, and all narcissists blame everybody else for their behavior. It's never their fault. So right. Responsibility is omitted here, period.
That's right. Jesus Christ has to bear the responsibility. Poor Jesus.
But that's so bizarre, because how can anybody that lived 150 years ago or 2,000 years ago be responsible for what you're doing today? They can't. That's just an excuse. Right. John, explain to the people what blood atonement is.
Well, if you look at it from the Mormon fundamentalist point of view, what you're doing is it was originally directed at apostates. And they committed a sin so great that the only way they could be saved was to have their blood shed. And then the smoke from the blood in the earth would go up to heaven and save them. If you were to study blood atonement, I would suggest that you start with Michael Quinn's Origins of Power. And in it, he talks about a man named Samson Avard. And Samson, this all occurred in Missouri when they had some of the people were starting to apostate and disappear. And Sidney Rigdon gave his famous salt sermon, which was kind of a warning to the Missourians, and a lot of people think had a lot to do with the war between the Missourians and the Latter-day Saints. But it was directed to mostly to the apostates, and the apologists kind of blame Avard for it. But Avard eventually apostated himself and told a lot of the things that went on there. And there was one meeting in which Sidney Rigdon, they were talking about apostate, and he says, well, last night a fellow slipped his wind last night, meaning he got his throat cut.
But the point that I'm trying to drive at is that these groups and these murders still continue because it is a tenet of their religion.
Well,
or is it just an excuse to get away with murder? I think it's an excuse. But
yeah, it really is. From a practical point of view, it's just an excuse. But where you really want to get into it is in the Journal of Discourses, especially the 4th volume, where Brigham Young, in 2 or 3 different sermons back in the 1850s, talked about how he knew of people who came to him and wanted to be blood atoned because of the sins that they committed. And adultery was one of the serious sins that had to be atoned by blood atonement. And also apostasy and of course anything against the priesthood was a grievous sin that needed to be atoned for. And you can read the history books back then, and there are several murders that are unsolved. But it first started with the apostates, and then it moved to any enemy of the church.
And isn't that a common factor, not just among the narcissistic behavior of the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, but isn't it also a behavior among the fundamentalist Islamic people the same in their honor killings? Isn't it exactly the same thing that only the extremists do?
Yeah, it's the zealots are the one who keep it going. And Rulon Jeffs, Warren's father, wrote upon it and said that the blood atonement was a correct principle, and they preached it. And in fact, I know for a fact in a meeting that I attended, a 70s quorum, while with AUB, it was admitted then by the head of the 70s quorum that blood atonement was a valid and a correct principle.
John, I want to thank you for your delightful interview. I want to thank you for being with us today, and you are a remarkable person. Thank you so much for all you have to offer.
Well, you're welcome.
Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to find out how much of this recorded and see if the last part of it did record, but I know you got to go. But if it all recorded, I think we're great. And then if you got an opening tomorrow morning, we'll go directly into sex crimes and blood atonement. Or we did a little blood atonement. We can go into sex crimes if you want, or mix them up.
Okay. However you
want.
want.
I'll call you tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And take good care of yourself. I'd feel cheated if you left this life before I could take your wisdom and document it all.
Okay.
Besides, I like you. You're cool.
We'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.